What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Class 5 of Peep Game Volume 1. Today we're going to discuss how licensing works. I hope you're ready to learn because we have a lot of information to cover. As always, keep a pen and a pad nearby or a mobile device so you can take notes. And let's move on to our overview. So today is really just two simple points. First, we're going to answer the question, what is licensing? And then we'll talk about the different license types. So let's move along and get straight to it. For our first slide, what is licensing? Point number one, it is the process and procedure of granting an entity the right to use your music for commercial or personal purposes. Point number two, licensing ensures that you are properly compensated for the use of your work. And number three, in most instances, only the copyright holder can issue a license for a musical work. As musicians, licensing is how we make our money. So before a company or any individual person uses your music, they must be granted the legal right to do so. Remember, at the very moment that you created your music, it was copyrighted. So legally, you have the rightful ownership over your intellectual property. And before anybody can use it, they must receive clearance from you. When we license our work to another entity, we are extending the rights that we have to them. On the first point, we make mention of commercial and personal purposes. When we use the word commercial, we're typically referring to everything pertaining to money. And when we use the word personal, we're referring to something that's motivated by passion. So here's an example. Let's say someone has a YouTube channel and they plan on using your music in the background while they talk about baking, cooking, cleaning, or essentially anything that you could find on YouTube. That would count as a commercial use. YouTube has their partnership with content creators that allows them to monetize their video and collect money from ads. They're using your music in the process of them making money. That's a commercial use. Now here's another example. Someone makes a short film about mental health and the importance of daily checkups and creating a safe space to release your emotions. They want to use your music for film, and they say it's a non-profit project, and they'll only be using the film for mental health awareness. Now we can say that that is something personally motivated, and we can even classify it as an act of passion. Now in either instance, if someone wants to use your music for commercial purposes or personal purposes, you have the right to charge. Now I'm going to share something with y'all from my experience. There was a time where a friend and I had actually did some work for somebody who created a project for mental health awareness. The film they created was nonprofit. It wasn't placed on any DSPs, or at least to our knowledge, it wasn't placed on any streaming services like Netflix or Hulu, etc. However, the film was used as a part of a presentation for a contest. The film ended up winning the contest as well as several other awards, and it helped to further the careers of the filmmaker as well as the mental health advocates, all of whom will remain unnamed. Nonetheless, my friend and I didn't have our business in order. We weren't compensated, and the filmmaker as well as the other advocates for mental health ceased all communication. To this day, we actually don't know if the film has been used to gain any money or any more attention or further anybody else's career. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use your music for good causes or even be generous. However, even if somebody is doing a project that is based on passion or something that's helping other people, there may come a time where they choose to use it for monetary gain. Or in other instances, when somebody's doing a project that's based in passion, that project may be used to further their career and make them money later on in life. Without having the proper procedures in order and going through the process of actually licensing out your work, you can lose out on potential monies. Now, keep all that in mind. Let's move on to the various license types that we have. There are multiple license types that a copyright holder can issue for one musical work, and each license has a different use and generates money in a different way. There are two ways that you can issue a license for your music. One, you can register your work with the rights organization and allow them to issue licenses on your behalf. And the second way you can issue a license is you can contact a lawyer and write up a contract that specifically details the rights of use. Now, to be clear, you need to make use of both methods. Whether you release a song or contribute to the composition of another person's song, your music should be registered with your rights organizations, such as a performance rights organization and a mechanical rights organization. And depending on the situation, you may need to sign a contract that clearly and concisely states the rights that you are extending to an entity for the use of your work. We're going to discuss this in depth on the upcoming slides. Also, keep this in mind. The name of the type of license that you issue will also be the name of the royalty that you receive. Let's continue. Starting with our first example, we're going to discuss the synchronization license. So you would want to issue a synchronization license when somebody wants to use your music in a motion picture. This license type specifically relates to the composition of your song and not the master recording. Now, because of this, it is standard practice to issue a master recording license along with a sync license. Keep that in mind. The most effective way for you to get a placement on a TV show or film or video game is to use a sync license music library. Now, sometimes they're just called music libraries. However, if you type in music sync library into your web browser, I guarantee you'll find better results. But for the remainder of this video, we're just going to refer to them as music libraries. Music libraries are companies that host a large catalog of music and gives entities the opportunity to license music for motion pictures. If you were to submit your music to one of these libraries and someone wanted to license your music or your songs, the sync library would employ an agent from their company to help you negotiate a contract between the potential client and you. This negotiation would include an upfront fee, a license fee for your song, as well as any potential royalties on the back end. Now, if this is something you're interested in, you can visit a company or website like millennialmind.co. Then click on the music libraries. At the moment, they have over 40 plus music libraries listed on their site. So should you decide to submit your music to a library, there's a few things you should do. Look for reviews. You can use platforms like Google, Yelp, or even forums like Reddit or Quora, and you can find reviews there. Now, when you visit their website, check them out and see who they've worked with. Is it major publications, minor publications, independent game and filmmakers, or major game and filmmakers? And also, you should contact them and speak to an employee so you can inquire about the process of sync licensing as well as their services. One of their agents or representatives can give you some more clarity and insight specifically into how their company goes about licensing music for sync. Now let's move on to our next license type. Next, we have our mechanical license. This license allows for licensors to reproduce your work, and mechanical royalties are paid using statutory rates, and this license can be obtained through an MRO, the copyright holder, or the government's copyright department. So let's focus in on point number one. This license allows for licensors to reproduce your work. Now I'm going to read a little bit from the book. This will be from page 23. It says mechanical royalties. The term mechanical royalty refers to the money generated from the reproduction of a musical work intended for distribution. It was the 1909 Copyright Act that required payments to be made for the mechanical reproduction of sound. Although the mechanical royalty was created during the era of the phonorecord, an era where sound was still mechanically reproduced, its relevancy has remained throughout time into the current digital era and covers other areas in which a composition could be copied. Here are a few instances in which a mechanical royalty would be generated. 1. Physical, when a vinyl record, cassette, CD, or any physical music format is printed. Or digital, when a song is downloaded or streamed for 30 seconds, a copy of that song is being reproduced and generates a royalty. Or a new recording, when a cover, live performance, remix, or new stylistic version of a song is recorded. Now, all of those count as reproductions of the work, physical formats, digital formats, and new recordings. Now, the only way for you to issue a license to a company, or entity, or any person to mechanically reproduce your music is that you go through an MRO, or mechanical rights organization. And the mechanical royalties are paid using statutory rates. I'm going to read this part from the book as well. In the U.S., mechanical royalties are paid at a statutory rate of 9.1 cents for every reproduction of the composition, with an additional 1 3/4 cent to be paid per minute for songs over 5 minutes in length. So we're going to use a short example to explain how mechanical licensing works. Let's say someone recorded a cover of your song and wanted to release it commercially for download and streaming. There are 3 ways they can go about it. They can contact an MRO like the Harry Fox Agency, aka the HFA, and request a mechanical license to use your composition. 2. They can contact you or your publisher directly and request for your permission to cover your song. Thereafter, you and the person wishing to obtain the license can begin negotiations. They may request that you completely eliminate the need for royalty payments, and should you choose to oblige, you can require that a one-time payment be made for your services. Or if they request a reduced royalty payment, you can still require a one-time payment to be made. Afterwards, you must provide the licensee with the formal document stating that they have the right to use your music. The licensee will then apply for a mechanical license from the HFA and send them a copy of the document stating that they have the right to pay a reduced royalty rate. Now, whether you choose to eliminate or reduce the royalty rate is completely up to you. In either case, you'll still need to create a contract that details the agreement between you and the licensee. Lastly, if someone wanted to get a mechanical license to cover your song, they can contact the U.S. government's copyright department known as the MLC. Now, that was a lot of information. Rewatch this part however many times you need to. Let's move on to our next license type. Next, we have the public performance license. This allows for licensors to play your music in a public place, live or pre-recorded. Now, this license can only be obtained from a pro, also known as performance rights organization. So whenever your song is performed live, streamed, or even recorded live, that is considered a public performance. There's two things that should be happening here. The venue or DSP that's using your song, they should have a queue list or consumer reports list that states how many times your song was used, when it was used, as well as the length or the duration of time it was used for. That information should then be turned over to your performance rights organization. There are two ways someone can obtain a license to publicly perform your music. 1, they'll have to contact you or your publisher for the rights to perform it. Or 2, they'll have to go to a performance rights organization and obtain a license to publicly use your work. Depending on where and how your work is being used will determine the method of licensing to be used. Here's 2 examples. Example 1, if I recorded a cover of your song, I'd have to contact either you or your publisher before I can publicly perform it. Example number 2, a commercial entity such as a DSP, a performance venue, or a public broadcaster will have to go to a performance rights organization and obtain a license to use a composition. Let's move on to our next example. We have the master recording license. This allows for licensors to use your master recording in a new audio or audio-visual media, and this license can only be obtained from the copyright holder, such as yourself, or if you have a record deal, the entity that you're signed to. Now, this may sound a little similar to the sync license, and in some ways it is, but there is a difference though. The sync license allows for licensors to synchronize the composition of the record to a motion picture, while the master recording allows licensors to sync the master recording to the motion picture. Now remember, somebody can take the composition and have somebody else record it and create their own master recording that they own. But in this instance, if you were licensing the master recording over, you may not even be the owner of the composition. You're just making use of a composition to create your master recording. You can then take that master recording and license it out. Now, the way that you license out a master recording is circumstantial. If you want to license out your master recording to DSPs such as Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, etc., you'll have to go through a digital distributor. If you want to license out your master recording for use in motion picture such as video games, movies, etc., you should probably go through a music library, like we talked about earlier, or sync library. There may even be another instance where somebody samples a part of your work and you're an indie artist, and you'll have to license out the rights to use that master recording as a part of their new composition or new work. You'll have to create a contract that lays out the stipulations of how the record will be used. Let's move on to our next slide. We have the print license. This allows for licensors to sell your music as sheet music, fully notated, or lead sheets. This license can only be obtained from the copyright holder. Now, a print license is really only necessary if someone wants to include your lyrics or your music in a songbook. And the standard print royalty is 10% to 12% of the retail price of the book. So if you have a publisher, they may want to be on the lookout for this opportunity. It isn't the most lucrative business venture since people are largely consuming music digitally, and even sheet music can be downloaded online. Nonetheless, it's an additional source of income. And moving on to our last slide, we have the blanket license. This gives licensors the right to use a broad range of musical works from various copyright holders. This license type is primarily issued by PROs, MROs, or CMOs. Now, typically, these licenses have to be renewed on an annual basis. And again, PROs, MROs, and CMOs use this type of license. Now, this license is typically obtained by bars, restaurants, theme parks, venue owners, radio stations, and essentially anybody or any business that plays music while servicing a multitude of people. Here's just a few more things that I want to say before we end today's class. Licensing tips. When you license a song for synchronization, you should also issue a license for the master. Now, I know we already covered that in the class. Point number 2, license all of your compositions with your PRO, MRO, and if you have one, a CMO. When a license is issued for someone to use the composition of your song, these organizations will collect residual royalties on your behalf and disperse them to you. Lastly, if you are approached directly with the contract to license your work, have an attorney look over the contract and direct them to the corresponding organizations if necessary. So as I shared with you earlier, my friend and I didn't have our business in order, which is largely the reason why we missed out on any potential royalties or monies to be made from allowing our work to be used in a film. So make sure that you understand the information that was presented to you in today's class, and you'll be able to avoid some of the issues that I've encountered. Now, that is all for today's class. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And if you have any information that you would like to share, leave that in the comments as well. This is a community. We are here to help each other learn and grow. For now, thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next class.